On this episode of the InsurTech Geek podcast, we explore risk, innovation, and the future of insurance with Amir Kabir, founding and managing partner of Overlook Ventures.
The InsurTech Geek podcast is all about technology that's transforming and disrupting the insurance world. We'll be interviewing guests and doing deep dives into specific tech we see changing the industry. We're taking you on a journey through insurance tech. So enjoy the ride and geek out.
Terra. This week's episode sponsor is revolutionizing the world of workers' compensation claims and policy management. Terra's cutting-edge platform empowers insurers with comprehensive benchmarking tools, robust management systems, and an integrated ancillary services marketplace. Discover how Terra is driving innovation and efficiency in workers' comp at terra.insure.
And we are back with another great episode of the InsurTech Geek podcast. I am your InsurTech Geek, James Benham. With me, the most interesting man in insurance, my main man in San Antonio, Texas, Mr. Rob Galbraith. Rob, how's it going over there in the cedar country of Texas?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, we've got so much just dumped on the ground here, and of course the wind's blowing everything. So the nice thing is that the temperatures have gotten warm enough to be quite comfortable before the 100-degree days of summer. But the bad news is the allergens are spreading all over.
Yeah. It was when it blows over to College Station, it usually causes 1 to 2 weeks of absolute hell and torment for me. So, do you know, I did some digging this year. That is a law of unintended consequences case study, because city planners 75 and 100 years ago decided to plant cedar trees, but to avoid the mess of female cedar trees are male or female or both. Believe it or not, there are some cedar trees that the top part is one gender, the bottom part is another gender. The female cedar trees have a little berry that is the receptor for that pollen. And so what happened is the city planners didn't want those berries littering their sidewalks. So they planted all male cedar trees. So guess what all male cedar trees do when there's no female cedar trees around? They dump ungodly amounts of pollen into the air. There's nothing to receive it or scrub it out of the air. And we end up in cedar fever. And it's all because city planners didn't want to sweep some berries up. So the solve is simple. Plant female cedar trees. Believe it or not. Didn't know that, but now you do. With us to not talk about cedar trees is my new friend. We really enjoyed our pre-show talk, Amir Kabir. Amir, how are you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me. Great to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, where are you joining us from today, Amir?
I'm in San Francisco. I've been here for the past decade plus.
Nice. And how are things in San Francisco today? I'm assuming maybe a little cloudy, maybe a cool breeze off the ocean and 72?
Almost. But no, I think we're getting into the better weather area or time. Usually it warms up in March again till like November-ish, and then it gets colder. But people are talking about like climate change and whatever. I think we're feeling this somehow. Some things are changing for sure.
Yep, interesting topic we won't dive into today, but it's good to see you. I'm glad you're joining us, and welcome from beautiful San Francisco. I always have a good time visiting San Francisco. Some amazing restaurant scene there. Really phenomenal.
It's interesting because like obviously we went to the whole COVID era and things kind of very slowed down, but we're getting very back to where we were before. The new mayor is doing an amazing job. New businesses are opening, the restaurants are opening. So yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah. It's great. Well, we're going to jump in, here on the InsurTech Geek podcast, we talk about insurance and technology and the nexus thereof. Rob and I have been doing this for pretty much 6 years now, which is crazy, Rob, right?
It is.
I know.
It is.
And I think we've hung out in person like 3 times total. Yeah. Because we see each other all the time, but it's here. Been doing this a long time. And we love talking about that. But we also love talking about the people behind the industry. Obviously, InsurTech has evolved a lot. I've been building software for insurance and working for carriers, TPAs, MGAs, PBMs, you name it, since 2004. Rob's been in the industry, 25, 30 years at this point?
25-ish, yeah. Lost count.
25-ish. I'm at 22 years in the industry, 25 in business. Rob's at about 25 in the industry. He started on the business side. I started on the technology side, and we kind of met in the middle. Now I definitely span the gap, and so does Rob. We both kind of stand in the middle of ops and technology, and that's how we got together on this. But we want to hear about you, because you have a really interesting life path. And I'd like to kind of walk through where you were born and raised and what led you. Well, we'll actually keep it to that. Where were you born and raised, and what did you want to do when you were growing up?
It's a very deep question to start with, but let's do it. I was born in Iran, and my parents immigrated to Germany when I was a toddler, a little kid, and I always was fascinated by, I don't know, technology and building, I would say. I built my own computer when I was a teenager and was always fascinated by, new things. And when you ask my younger self what I wanted to be, I think I was fascinated by WWE, so I wanted to be a wrestler when I was younger. So Hulk Hogan was definitely an idol. But, that changed over time, I guess. And so we're here today.
Yeah, it's interesting that you were born in Iran, raised in Germany. I was born and raised in Louisiana, the deep South United States, and we both wanted to be WWE guys.
There you go. You see? That's perfect.
Every Saturday morning, my best friend and I, if he was over probably half the Saturdays, and the other half I was by myself. I watched WWE. I was a big fan of Andre the Giant and Hulk Hogan, and all the.
And I thought everything is true. That was on top of it. That's 100% true until someday I woke up and felt that was a delusion.
Yeah, well, they're good actors, or sometimes they're not. So it's a fun childhood. So what at Germany? Did you then go to college there and start your work there? Because I'm seeing, on your resume, it looks like you went to University of Cologne. I'm seeing actually a few degrees here. A couple of German universities and maybe a couple of United States universities. So what was the educational path?
Sure. Yeah. So as mentioned, always fascinated by, tech and curious about, the new things, and kind of, built my own computer when I was a teenager, and that kind of translated into the love for, building other things like businesses. I, started businesses. I was part of a, startup early on. In Germany, we were building enterprise software back in the days on premise. There was no AI and cloud and whatnot. I have a degree in computer science and business from the University of Cologne, and from a private school in Cologne as well. The company I was part of, or the startup I was part of, we were building it in a tiny town down in the south, which is called Karlsruhe. Karlsruhe has the Karlsruhe Institute of Technology, which, people compare to the MIT. They call it the KIT. There's a lot of, technical folks coming out of that, given the strength and the depth of the program. And so the company we were building eventually was acquired. After 6 years, I joined by Actuate here in San Mateo. So by a Silicon Valley company, which was a great outcome, now looking back, for a small software shop out of, a small town in Germany. And then I basically also started another company, but that was a complete, disaster, I would call. I think, learnings there is, pick your partner wisely and who you work with. And that's one aspect of it, but also what problem are you solving? Try to find a problem before you find a solution. And so that's kind of, path in Germany, I would say, in a short format. And my goal, was always to somehow come to the US. I was fascinated by the American dream, watching the movies and, hearing that and seeing all of the, TV series. And obviously, being in technology in Europe and Germany, knowing about, Silicon Valley, knowing about, Yahoo and AOL very early on, and then Google and Facebook and whatnot. So that was fascinating to me. And so it's been now, I have to count, 13 years almost. It was August in 2013. I basically packed my 2 suitcases and, sold some assets and immigrated to this beautiful country. And I initially came for business school. Going back to your question, I got my MBA at Georgetown. That's how I got to the US. But my goal was basically, to figure out how can I, figure out this American dream, first of all, but also how can I get into tech in Silicon Valley eventually. And that's kind of been the way I started. I started very early on, my career in the DC area with the fund called Route 66 Ventures. It's a small venture fund that was set up by a former entrepreneur that was in the financial services sector, and that's how I got into investing, but also into investing within the broader financial services sector and also insurance. The first deal I actually worked on was a product warranty play out of Germany called Simplesurance. And so that's how I learned about, not only investing, but also the insurance front. And I moved over to San Francisco. It was 11 years ago, and I've been here since. And I was part of the founding team at Munich Re Ventures. I was number 3 on the team there when we started with $50 million and grew it to over $1 billion. I left 6 years in, and then I became a general partner at a fund called AV8. I joined on their second fund at the Force GP to build out their practice on, the broader financial services side. And my goal was always to start my own fund, and resigned there and, began the journey of starting and building my own fund, Overlook Ventures, earlier last year. So that's been the journey over the last, 3 decades. Along the way, I became a U.S. citizen, so that American dream somehow became true, I would say. And, it was a lot of ups and a lot of downs, but, very grateful to be here.
That's awesome. What a great story. I'm glad you're here too, man. I have a lot. I have a lot of Persian friends, and I have, I have a very diverse company from a geographic perspective. People from all over the world work with me, in our 270 teammates or so. So we got folks in Argentina and Ireland and Colombia, and all over the place. They're all over the world, and South Africa. Great people, yeah. And so it's fun to see how many innovative minds there are all over the place. I was looking through your portfolio at Overlook, and so just tell us real quick. You have a heavy risk, like you've invested heavily in risk at Overlook, right?
Yes. So I think the way I define the thesis there, and I think it's a culmination of the last obviously 10 years of investing, but also 20 years of building. I believe 2 things are true. One is that technology is always going through cycles, but risk always evolves and emerges through those cycles, right? And so, today it's AI, the last wave, it was now blockchain, then, we had cloud, then we had mobile, then we had whatever, right? And so those cycles are always an up and down, but what never disappears is risk, and risk is always emerging and evolving through those cycles. And so the thesis of the fund is to basically invest at the intersection of risk and frontier technology in companies that are building the infrastructure of risk. And what I mean with that is that I'm looking into companies that are building software or platforms that help you better manage, measure, or mitigate risk one way or the other. And in the practice, that these are companies that are building simulation software for autonomy, robotics foundation models, cyber incident response, deepfake detection, or new insurance products for, hardware, right? So it's kind of a broader risk theme here. And I know a lot of people ask me like, well, risk is so broad, like, what do you mean with that? Yes, there's a lot of risk in pharma, there's a lot of risk in biotech, there's a lot of risk in a bunch of these kind of areas. I'm trying to, stay kind of within the sectors that I have deeply understanding in, and also a deep network in, where I can help the founders I work with.
That's awesome. Rob?
Amir, thank you so much for sharing your story and being our guest today. It's really inspirational, and it's pretty neat to get to know a little bit about you and your background. So I'm really fascinated from those, I would call them the early kind of InsurTech days till now, like some of the companies that you had investments in Next Insurance, of course, Insure, bought by many. To me, is like a favorite, like kind of niche one that didn't last, but I think was actually very shaped kind of the early days of the industry. And there's a lot of folks that came out of that have led other ventures. So I'm just kind of, having been, an observer, right, and involved in some of these startups over the last 10 years, but it's changed quite a bit. I kind of remember the frothy kind of early days and the excitement to the maturity, right? Obviously, we've got COVID and hard market cycles kind of going through that. So just comparing some of those maybe early days at Munich Re Ventures, which was, again, a very foundational corporate VC in the early days till now. What have you seen kind of in the InsurTech journey, I guess, over the past decade?
Great question, and I think there's a lot of to unpack here. When we started kind of Munich Re Ventures, it was like early 2014. I think 2015 we really kind of took off there. It was kind of the early days of this word called InsurTech, right? I mean, there was not really much out there, and I believe what we saw and what people focused on was basically, or the nuance was like, look, insurance is an outdated business. Insurance carriers are not really customer centric. They don't really care about you. They actually don't call you customer. They call you policyholders, right? And there's an opportunity to make this better, faster, neater, more appealing to the customer, let's say it this way, right? And I think the notion was also, look, it's hard to communicate with an insurance carrier, again, going back to the premise of like, they don't care about you. So it's hard to have the direct communications lines and so on and so forth. So how can we make this better? And everyone kind of focused on the traditional lines of businesses, right? Auto, home, renters. Next Insurance, I think, was one of the few ones with some others that were focused on small businesses. Most of the business models were, traditional MGA models, tech-enabled MGA models. And, many, I think, thought that, insurance is a scalable business as a SaaS business, right? But I think pretty quickly realized that, I love this term that insurance is a get-rich-slowly business. At the end of the day, it's a risk business, right? You're underwriting risk. And so if you don't do that the right way early on, it will cost you on the back end, right? And so for us, I think obviously very fortunate to be within the broader Munich Re group, we actually didn't look at many of these, traditional lines like auto, renters, and home early on, because I think obviously there was the notion of like, we don't believe that there's much to do there, right? And I think now I have a different view there too, and understand, because when you look at those markets and that too, and I think people have realized that these are highly saturated markets, price driven and highly competitive. And when you take those three, things together, plus highly regulated, meaning you can't just come up with a new product, right? Then it's going to be really, really hard to just, win the market with better customer UI, UX, right? And I think people realize that quickly, that, you can't go to market quickly and you will always get a new customer. The question is, do you want that customer, and is that customer good a customer to underwrite, right? And so that was kind of the early days. And what we kind of focused on in the Munich Re time were the ones you mentioned, like, Next Insurance with it, Insure, HDVI, bought by many. All of these were kind of in a category or bucket for themselves, where I feel, and I know I understand now better, obviously, is that, hey, incumbents don't really have technological innovation maybe in those sectors, right? And how can you use tech to make this better without really, maybe disrupting the ecosystem, but more enabling the ecosystem? And that was the case for Next Insurance, right? That was the case for Insure, right? I mean, they're focused on like, taxi and black car drivers, right? And when you think about the problem statement of like, when you are a taxi driver, and I think you guys had Dan on, that you want to get insurance, and it was like very cumbersome to do, and it was very hard. It took a long time. So everything that resonates from the VC perspective of like, hey, how can you use technology to make things better? I think bought by many also, as you mentioned, focused on pet, and how can you do that differently there? And the premise in the early days was like, hey, we're going to pool everyone into different kind of buckets that have maybe a German Shepherd and have maybe a Persian cat, and that we kind of price them that way. And so these were the kind of topics we were kind of focused on. And I think over the last 10 years, a lot of people learned, and me included, of like what is feasible and what is venture backable and what not. And I think there's a lot of opportunities, but what people I think also realize is that, I'm sure people are still looking for the $10 billion win. It's going to be much harder to get a $10 billion exit in insurance than it is in a traditional venture play, right?
Yep.
I still believe there is still the opportunity to create $1 billion business within insurance, but getting to 5 is tough, and getting to 10, I don't want to say impossible, but we might be close to that, right? And so that's kind of the overview. And I mean, I'm sure you guys all have seen like, some graphics I designed too. I started thinking about, insurance during the time when I was at Munich Re, and then when I left, I put a graph together over the last 100 years of insurance that I think went viral through the community and through LinkedIn. And the goal for me was like actually to understand better, like where are we coming from and where are we going, and what has happened in between. And so I believe we're in an interesting time here, coming out of like the hype of InsurTech and going into the hype of now AI plus InsurTech. And I think there's a lot of interesting concepts out there, but I'm still cautious in terms of like what is possible and what not.
Yeah, well, I'm having a hard time because I work with quite a few insurance companies in various capacities. I'm having a hard time distinguishing insurtechs from insurance companies in a lot of cases, because they're, all the insurance companies I know have major AI initiatives and automation initiatives, and they're doing a lot there. InsurTechs came and challenged the ideas, and I actually think it served the industry well, because it got a lot of executives to really rethink core processes like quote, bind, pay, rate, underwrite, issue, renew, first notice of loss, claims handling, settlements, payments, claim closure. I mean, you could run through all the major transactions of insurance, and they've all been challenged. And some of those challenges failed because trying to disintermediate all the brokers was probably a fool's errand. Now that you see what really happened, a lot of folks that said they were going to disintermediate brokers ended up providing technology to brokers.
Yep.
I would argue AI is probably the most disruptive tool that I've ever seen in 25 years of being in business, and I started writing code 34 years ago. So it is by far the most disruptive tool, because it reaches every corner of product engineering and design and development and marketing and sales and operations. And it can, for the first time in my career in insurance, I don't have to say, no, we can't do that. I just say, no, we got to do some automation work, but we can tackle that task. Yep. Advanced cognition, reasoning, thinking. Yep, we can do that. Sure. Yeah. Read all the forms, extract all the unstructured data, put it into a structured data set, and then make a prediction on the likelihood there's going to be this kind of event on the claim. Yep. Yeah, we can do that. So it's a very interesting time, I think. Also just to be in software development during this time is very interesting, because we're really solutions engineers. We were already making the move to being solutions engineers, not software developers. We're continuing to make that move into solution engineering, being really, really good at prompting, et cetera. So what do you think? I see some former investments. I'm hoping those mean successful exits on your website, and you have quite a few current holdings. Who are the winners and losers in all of this? I'm really interested for your opinion, because obviously you have to make decisions predicting winners and losers as a venture capitalist. So who are the real winners and losers in the current iteration of the great industrial revolution that's going on?
I mean, are we talking about like the ones that are still active in terms of like the InsurTechs, you mean, or what is the future?
Anything. You obviously have deal flow of deals coming across your deck. And so you're evaluating deal flow right now, and you have. I don't want you to speak to your current investments because that would require you to disclose confidential information. So let's just say you see a lot of deal flow coming across your desk. You've seen what companies have exited, what companies have bombed, which ones have returned capital, which ones have been runaway hits. Who do you see as the winners and losers in all this?
Yeah, I think again going back to 10 years, the last 10 years, 15 years, and now the notion. Again, when kind of the InsurTech wave started, everyone was focused on these tech-enabled MGAs. And then, as you mentioned, people realized, that might not really work out the way they thought it would work out. And now I think that the notion shifted of like, hey, AI is the newest thing, and let's build software to sell, to insurance companies or insurance-adjacent companies, right? And so I see a lot of companies trying to disrupt the broker or agent, meaning not disrupt is the wrong word, enable the broker or agent, right? Selling some software tools to them to help them, as you mentioned, with better coding, better binding, better servicing, whatever it might be, right? I still see, believe it or not, people still trying to want to disrupt auto insurance, traditional auto insurance. So yes, it's still out there. It's quite interesting. And I always have to scratch my head. Then I still see, or like things that have emerged, as you mentioned too, on this topic of claims. I think claims has been, I think AI will play a huge role there, right? As you mentioned, of like being able now to ingest a lot of data and kind of make, not only predictions, but also assumptions and so on and so forth, right? So that's, I think, very helpful on the claims side. I still believe in tech-enabled MGAs, right? I still believe there's an opportunity, but you have to be mindful of like, what does the opportunity look like, right? Again, is this going to be a $10 billion business? I don't know, and I don't think so. But can this be a $1 billion business? Yes, and that makes sense maybe for me having a small fund for sure, but larger funds might not agree with that. But at the same time, it's a good question of, if those tech software plays that are selling into the insurance ecosystem can be a $10 billion business as well, right? I think people are pointing to Verisk and RMS and all of these bigger players out there, Applied Systems and whatnot. I totally agree. I think like it's all good and fine. But, for them to get where they are, it took a long time. And I think that the reason is because we're dealing or operating in regulated markets, right? And so going back to AI, I think is also an interesting point is that, yes, you can do all of the things with AI and it's amazing. The question you should also ask is like, will you be able to do that in terms of regulatory barriers, right? As you know, and the guests of the show probably know, like just spitting out a new product with better AI will not, be feasible in the traditional lines and the traditional markets that are admitted, right? Yeah, you can maybe go into the ENS market and create a new product, but then you also have the distribution problem of like, how do you get this in front of people and how do you advertise this and so on and so forth. So, I mean, I've made when you look at the fund today and investments made today, I would say a third of that you would maybe categorize as traditional InsurTech. A third of that is traditional, technology or 2/3 is traditional, enterprise software that could play a role within regulated markets, but not only insurance, that could be financial services, that could be healthcare, it could be whatnot. So I think if you think about it that way, if you want to sell software and if you want to, create like a huge outcome, it has to be across verticals. I think it's going to be really hard to be just selling into the insurance business, given the venture timelines we have from 5 to 10 years now, they can become even longer, let's say 12 years, to get to a $10 billion outcome. I still have a hard time thinking about that.
Awesome. Rob, bring us home.
Yeah, Amir, fascinating. Obviously, we could go on for a long time, but in the interest of keeping this to a listenable, manageable length for our audience, I'm very curious how you think about the nature of risk today and how it is changing and evolving and what opportunities that might open.
Yeah, great question. And I mean, that's the stuff I try to really focus on a daily basis. I try to figure out what does the future somehow look like? I mean, predicting it's going to be hard, right? But like maybe what does future society look like with everything that we have going on today? I think people are talking about humanoid robots, a lot about autonomy, obviously, about robotics. And when you think about that and the traditional insurance, sector, it's completely different because right now insurance is kind of, focused on, risks that are happening, within human society. But how does this look like if we have a robot running around and serving us in a home setting and maybe making a mistake, doing something really bad? What are the risks that are emerging there, and how can you learn about this today? Like, that's just one example, right? That I'm kind of, interested in. And so I think liability is getting weird. AI decision-making, autonomous vehicles, algorithmic systems are creating all new liability scenarios. And so that don't really map cleanly into existing policy structures. So who's liable when AI, goes rogue, when robots injure, and so on and so forth? That's one. I think another aspect is, longevity risk, and how that's becoming a systemic problem too, right? People are living much, much longer than before. And we see that right now with long-term care being a huge problem, right? And how does that play a role? Pension systems, the gap between retirement savings and actual lifespan. And I think the third aspect here too, maybe just to close out, reputational and narrative risk is also another, category that is interesting to look at. A brand can be destroyed within 48 hours for a viral moment. Right? That was not the case 10 years ago. You can be hyped up in five minutes and you can be destroyed in 5 minutes. I think that's another thing that when you think about traditional liability and D&O policies, don't cover really this risk well. And how will this look like when we go future? I think these are 3 topics that come to mind. I think the first one being obviously the biggest one, but then the other 2 are kind of interesting adjacencies too that, are worth exploring.
Awesome. We're obviously at time, but it was a wonderful conversation. Amir, we really appreciate your insight into how you look at the world, at insurance, at investment, at what's going to work and what's not working, and where you see it going. I happen to be very aligned with your thinking on where we should invest dollars, we should invest resources, what we should be pursuing, and I think I love insurance is a great place to get rich slowly. Yeah. That describes it all, and it's an industry that thrives on stability, and predictability for survivability.
But when it works, it works, right?
When it works exceedingly well.
Correct.
When it works exceedingly well for all of the policyholders and for the owners of, said agencies, brokerages, MGAs, carriers, etc. So, and it does work out really well often, and so it is just it's not easy and it's not fast, and it requires a lot of patience, and I think you have to earn your stripes in insurance.
For sure,
it's hard to step in and
still
hard
learning.
to step in. Yeah, I'm at 20. I'm at 22 years. 2004 was my entry, so 22 years in insurance, and I still feel like I'm in my first half of my learning. Anyway,
fantastic.
Amir, let me just stop and mention, because you're Persian, you're born in Iran. I very much hope that you in the near future get to see long lost friends and family members that you have not been able to see in a long time. My heart breaks for you and all of your people that you have been separated from each other for so long. And I hope that the outcome of what's going on right now is a beautiful reunion for a beautiful people. I have many Persian friends. I absolutely love my Persian friends. I love what they stand for and what they represent. And I really hope you're reunited with your friends and family soon.
Very much appreciated. Thank you. Yeah, we all hope for a better future.
Yes. And to all of our listeners in Listenerland, thank you for listening in to another episode of the InsurTech Geek podcast. I've been James Benham, your InsurTech Geek, along with most interesting man in insurance, Mr. Rob Galbraith. We've been interviewing Mr. Amir. That's right. Amir Kabir.
Thanks for having me.
From Overlook. Go check him out at overlook.vc. We'll see you next time. Enjoy the ride and geek out.
The InsurTech Geek podcast is all about technology that's transforming and disrupting the insurance world. Hosted by James Benham at jamesbenham.com with co-host Rob Galbraith at endoffinsurance.com. The show takes listeners on a journey through insurance tech. So enjoy the ride and geek out.